Kid Cudi just dropped a bombshell in court, and it might be the most explosive moment in the Diddy trial yet. We're talking break-ins, Molotov cocktails, terrified phone calls at dawn, and one of hip-hop's biggest stars being stalked, threatened, and burned, literally. And the man behind it all, allegedly, Sean Diddy Combs. On day 9 of this federal trial, Cudi took the stand. Calm, composed, dead serious. Under oath, he laid out a chilling chain of events that prosecutors believe are far more than personal drama. They could be key evidence in a potential RICO case, the kind used against criminal enterprises. Let's break down every jaw-dropping moment of this testimony, what it means legally, and why this could be the beginning of the end for Diddy. You could feel it the moment he walked in. The tension, the weight, the silence that suddenly took over the room. Kid Cudi, known to fans as a genre-bending artist and introspective visionary, was now stepping into a very different spotlight. No red carpet, no music, just a federal courtroom, and the eyes of the nation watching. Wearing a jacket and smoking a cigarette, Cudi's entrance wasn't loud, but it spoke volumes. He didn't flinch, he didn't hesitate. He looked every bit like a man who had made peace with his past, and was now here to tell the truth. And sitting just feet away, Sean Diddy Combs, stone-faced, alert, and suddenly tense. As Cudi's name was called, Diddy reportedly whipped his head around to lock eyes with him. That single glance said everything. This wasn't just another witness. This was someone from Diddy's own world. Someone who knew things, saw things, lived through things. Someone who wasn't afraid anymore. Inside the courtroom, reporters noted a distinct shift. The jury leaned forward. Even the judge seemed extra attentive, because this testimony wasn't hearsay. It wasn't secondhand. This was first person, under oath, and devastatingly specific. For the prosecution, this was more than a witness. It was a cornerstone. And for Diddy, it may have been the moment he realized that his house of cards was starting to collapse. To understand why Kid Cudi's testimony matters so much, you have to rewind to 2011, a year that now feels like a ticking time bomb in this unfolding scandal. That's when Cudi and Cassie, yes, that Cassie, began quietly seeing each other. It wasn't public, it wasn't flashy. According to Cudi, it was brief, casual, but real. And that alone was enough to set Sean Diddy Combs off. Cudi testified that he and Cassie met at an event, connected over shared struggles in the industry, and eventually started spending time together. He didn't say it was serious, but it didn't need to be. The fact that she was no longer under Diddy's control was the threat. And then, the call came. Around 5:30 or 6 a.m., Cudi's phone rang. It was Cassie. Her voice was shaky. She was in full-blown panic. She told him that Diddy had found out about their relationship, and she feared what he might do. She didn't feel safe, not just emotionally, but physically. And when Cudi asked no questions, it said everything about what he already knew, or suspected, about Diddy's temper. "I'll come get you," he said. He drove straight to her location and picked her up, taking her to the Sunset Marquis Hotel, a secluded upscale spot often used by celebrities trying to stay under the radar. But even there, Cassie couldn't relax. Cudi told the court she was on edge, hyper-vigilant, like she knew something terrible was about to happen, and she wasn't wrong, because the chain reaction that followed that phone call would lead to home break-ins, firebombs, and the federal say. Government now examining Diddy not just as a disgruntled ex, but as the potential head of a criminal operation. And it all started with that 6 a.m. phone call. Kid Cudi returned home that morning with a pit in his stomach. He had just picked up a distressed Cassie, who seemed convinced that her life, and now his, was in danger. But nothing could prepare him for what he walked into. The front door wasn't broken. There was no shattered glass, no obvious signs of forced entry. But inside, everything felt violated. Cudi testified that the house was in complete disarray, but not in a random, chaotic way. Someone had been there with purpose, Gifts he had received from luxury brands, Chanel among them, had been opened and tossed aside. Wrapping. Paper was strewn across the floor. Personal items had been disturbed, examined. Whoever entered wasn't there to rob him. They were there to send a message. But the most unsettling part? His dog, his companion of 3 years, was locked in the bathroom. Not injured, but visibly shaken. Cudi had never left him like that. He told the court his dog was always free to roam the house. But this time it was different. Someone had deliberately confined the animal. Even more disturbing were the security cameras. Cudi had invested in home surveillance like many celebrities. But when he checked the footage, there was none. The cameras had been moved. Some pointed at walls, others unplugged entirely. Whoever had done this knew what they were doing. They were calculated, they were careful, and they wanted Cudi to know they had been there. And then came the call. Cudi, shaken and furious, picked up the phone and called Diddy. He didn't expect an apology, but what he got chilled him to the core. Diddy answered and simply said, "I'm over here waiting for you." It wasn't a denial. It wasn't even subtle. It was a taunt, a power play, a threat disguised as casual conversation. For prosecutors, this moment is critical. It shows intent, opportunity, and psychological intimidation. It reinforces the idea that this wasn't a petty, jealous outburst. It was a coordinated act meant to frighten, control, and dominate. Cudi testified that he wanted to confront Diddy, maybe even fight him, but something stopped him. He told the court, "I reminded myself." I don't know what he might have with him. In that sentence alone, you could hear the fear, the very real fear. That Diddy wasn't just a music mogul. He was someone with reach, with people, with power. And that's exactly what the prosecution wants the jury to see. That Diddy's empire may have been more than just bad boy records and fashion deals. It may have been something darker, more dangerous, and possibly criminal. In most criminal cases, the testimony centers on people, their words, their wounds, their reputations. But during Kid Cudi's time on the stand, it wasn't just human suffering he described. It was his dog. And that's where the courtroom got quiet. Cudi told the jury something small, but unforgettable. After the break-in, his dog changed. The animal he'd raised for 3 years, playful, loyal, calm, was suddenly not himself. No longer curious, no longer carefree. Instead, he was anxious, easily startled, constantly looking over his shoulder, jittery. Edge, scared. At first, it might have seemed like a strange detail to bring up in a federal trial, but the prosecution made it clear this wasn't just about a pet. It was about the atmosphere of terror that had been deliberately created, and it worked. The court debated whether the dog's emotional state was relevant. Diddy's lawyers objected, claiming it was speculative, hearsay, even theatrical. But the judge overruled them because here's the thing, animals don't lie. They react, and this dog was reacting to something. Cudi didn't break down on the stand, he didn't cry. But his voice carried the weight of someone who had been living in fear, not just for himself, but for the small, helpless creature that trusted him to keep it safe. And when your own home, the one place you're supposed to feel protected, is violated in that way, it leaves a scar, not just on drywall or luxury goods, but on your sense of reality. And that's what prosecutors want the jury to understand. This wasn't just about property damage. It was about sending a message, about control, about making sure no one felt safe crossing Sean Combs, even indirectly. Even, your dog isn't off limits. That's not a coincidence. That's terror tactics. And it fits the pattern of psychological warfare the prosecution is building into a potential racketeering charge. Cudi may have made peace with the events years later, but his dog never did. Just when Kid Cudi thought things couldn't get more surreal, the violence escalated. One afternoon, not long after the break-in, he received a frantic phone call. But it wasn't from Cassie. This time, it was from the dog sitter. Her voice was trembling. "Your car, your Porsche, it's on fire." At first, Cudi didn't believe it. Was it a prank? A mistake? but her tone told him everything. This wasn't a false alarm. He dropped everything and rushed back home. What he found in the driveway was horrifying. His prized Porsche, charred, scorched, and smoldering. The top had been cut open, not smashed, not shattered, surgically carved. And through that opening, someone had thrown in a Molotov cocktail, a handmade firebomb. In court, Cudi described it all in vivid detail. Photos of the aftermath were shown to the jury. Twisted metal, burn marks on the leather seats, and smoke damage that blanketed the interior. These weren't just acts of vandalism. This was arson. This was premeditated. A friend and collaborator, named Chip, had taken the photos, and Cudi brought them with him to the courtroom. Evidence of the literal flames consuming his life. And then came the most disturbing part of all, the way it was done. Someone had strategically damaged the car. This wasn't an angry smash and run. This was surgical, precise. A hole was made big enough to drop in the cocktail and nothing more. The message? Crystal clear. I know where you live. I know what you drive. I can reach you anytime I want. Cudi stood in court and recalled his reaction in real time. What the f? He muttered in disbelief. The defense objected to the profanity. The judge allowed it to stand. Because that's how real trauma sounds. It's not polished, it's raw. Now, legally speaking, this is where things get serious. This isn't just a civil issue. This is criminal property destruction, potentially even attempted intimidation with a deadly weapon. Prosecutors aren't just using this as evidence of personal retaliation. They're painting a larger picture, one of methodical terror designed to silence, threaten, and control. The fire wasn't just flames in a car. It was the ignition point for something bigger, something federal. Because if Sean Combs didn't light that fire himself, but arranged for someone else to do it, then we're not just dealing with jealousy, we're dealing with conspiracy, and conspiracy, when paired with threats, break-ins, and manipulation, lays the groundwork for RICO. This was no longer a feud between two artists. It was starting to look like organized crime. After the break-in, after the dog, and after the firebombing, there was still one more layer to this horror story, and it came directly from Cassie Ventura. Kid Cudi told the court that after the Porsche fire, he had a conversation with Cassie that shifted everything. Her voice, he recalled, was different. Not just scared, resigned, as if she knew what had happened, before it even happened. That's when she confessed something chilling. Sean "Diddy" Combs had warned her ahead of time. He told her he was going to do something to Cudi. That Cudi needed to be taken care of, that his car would get lit up. And most importantly, he allegedly made one thing very clear. It won't be me. I won't be in the country when it happens. Let that sink in. Diddy wasn't just angry. He was strategic, calculated. He didn't threaten Cudi in the heat of the moment. He set the stage for plausible deniability. In other words, I won't touch it, but I'll make sure it happens. That kind of distance isn't just smart, it's textbook behavior for someone trying to avoid criminal liability. Mob bosses do it, drug lords do it, cartel leaders do it, and now, prosecutors believe Diddy might have done it too. The court erupted with murmurs when this part of Cudi's testimony was read aloud. Because if true, it suggests Diddy wasn't just lashing out over a woman. He was running a coordinated campaign of psychological and physical intimidation, and making sure he had buffers in place to take the fall. And here's where it gets legally dangerous for Combs. RICO laws, short for the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, don't require the kingpin to pull the trigger, plant the bomb, or light the fire. All it takes is ordering, directing, or benefiting from the crime as part of an ongoing enterprise. And if Diddy made these threats to Cassie, if he warned her in advance, or if he made sure he wasn't in the country, that's not coincidence. That's premeditation. That's patterned behavior, which is exactly what federal prosecutors need to go after a RICO case. Cudi's car didn't just burn. It lit a fuse that could explode Diddy's entire empire. After the break-in, after the threats, after the Porsche firebombed in his own driveway, Kid Cudi did something no one expected. He reached out to Diddy. It wasn't to make peace. It wasn't forgiveness. It was self-preservation, an attempt to de-escalate something that had already spiraled far beyond industry beef. According to Cudi's testimony, a meeting was arranged, not in a law office, not on neutral ground, but at the Soho House, an exclusive, members-only social club frequented by Hollywood's elite. Chic, private, and polished on the outside. But on this day, it became the stage for something much darker. Cudi arrived first, waiting, calm, but on edge. This wasn't just another awkward run-in. This was war dressed up in designer clothing. Then Diddy arrived. And what happened next? Cudi described it with one line that now echoes throughout the media. He walked in, standing like a marvel. Supervillain. That's not metaphor, that's a mood, a presence. Diddy wasn't angry, he wasn't erratic, he was poised, powerful. Still wearing the mask of the music mogul, but with undertones of menace. He didn't sit. He didn't make small talk. Instead, he looked Cudi in the eyes and said, "We were homies, that's my girl." The subtext was crystal clear. You knew she was mine. You crossed the line. But Cudi didn't back down. His reply, "I thought you broke up." Tense silence followed. No raised voices, no threats. Just an unspoken power struggle between two men who once respected each other and were now divided by a woman, a fire, and years of unresolved tension. And then, things got strange. Diddy offered Cudi a glass of water. Let that sit for a second. Man who may have orchestrated a break-in, who might have firebombed your car, offers you a drink like it's a casual misunderstanding. That one act captured everything the prosecution is trying to prove. This wasn't impulsive rage. This was controlled psychological manipulation. Cudi told the jury that the entire meeting was surreal, like Diddy was trying to rewrite history in real time, pretending none of it had happened. That the fire, the threats, the fear, it was all just noise. But Cudi knew the truth. And in that room, despite the calm, he could still feel the danger. It wasn't about water. It was about power. And that exchange? It wasn't a reconciliation, it was a reminder. I'm still in control. But this time, Cudi didn't flinch. And now he's telling the story for the world to hear, under oath. Years passed. The fire had been put out. The police reports filed. Cudi's Porsche was long gone. But the damage, the kind you can't photograph, that stayed. The fear, the distrust, the feeling of being watched, targeted, hunted by someone who once called you family. And then, like something out of a bad dream, it happened again. Same setting, same city, the Soho House. Only this time, it wasn't planned. Cudi ran into Diddy unexpectedly. It had been a while, enough time for the wounds to scab over if not fully heal. But there was no drama, no confrontation, just Diddy, calm, polished, pretending everything was normal. And then out of nowhere, Diddy looked at him and said, "I'm just sorry for all that BS." That was it. No specifics, no names, no accountability. Not sorry I broke into your home, not sorry I threatened your girlfriend, not sorry your Porsche exploded in your driveway, just sorry for the BS. Cudi testified that he was surprised, not by the apology, but by how casually it was delivered, as if the entire series of traumatic events had been downgraded to some minor misunderstanding. A bad night, a little drama. And maybe that was the point, because for someone like Diddy, allegedly obsessed with control, dominance, and image, this wasn't an apology. It was a reset, a way to minimize what had happened, a way to frame the firebombing, the threats, and the stalking is nothing more than a footnote in their shared history. But for Cudi, it wasn't water under the bridge, it was confirmation. Confirmation that Diddy knew what he'd done, and still refused to take ownership. The jury listened closely as Cudi shared this moment, not because it was legally explosive, but because it showed mindset, because in cases like this, intent matters. Diddy wasn't pleading ignorance, he wasn't denying. He was acknowledging the chaos he'd caused, without ever truly owning it. And in that single moment, with that single sentence, he may have told the jury everything they needed to know. He didn't lose control. He was always in control. And he knew exactly what he was doing. Let's pause. What does this mean legally? Cudi's testimony isn't just emotional, it's strategic. It shows a pattern: intimidation, threats, property damage, use of third parties to carry out violence. These aren't random acts. Prosecutors believe they show a coordinated effort to control, silence, and punish people. And that's exactly what RICO laws are designed to target. If the jury believes Diddy orchestrated these acts, even without doing them himself, he could be looking at federal racketeering charges. Despite the damning testimony, Diddy stayed stone-faced in court, crossed arms, unmoved. Legal analysts say this is likely a strategy. Any visible emotion, especially rage, could destroy his defense. But behind that calm exterior, Diddy knows he's in trouble. The walls are closing in. The witnesses are stacking up. And with every testimony, the case for a criminal empire grows stronger. Kid Cudi's voice may have been calm, but the message was deafening. So, what do you think? Is Kid Cudi exposing the real Sean Combs? Or is there still more to the story? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want daily trial recaps, witness breakdowns, and everything happening inside and outside this courtroom, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. This trial isn't just a headline, it's a reckoning, and we're only getting started.